Pacific halibut are the largest flatfish in family Pleuronectidae. Halibut and other flatfish are flattened laterally and swim sideways, with one side facing down and the other facing up. The upper side is typically grey to brown, or nearly black, with mottling and numerous spots to blend in with a sandy or muddy bottom. The underside is typically white. Virtually all halibut are right-eyed, meaning both eyes are found on the upper, dark side of the body. Left-eyed halibut are rare. One report suggested a ratio of about 1 in 20,000. In these fish, the eyes and dark pigment are on the left side of the body, and the fish swims with the right, white, side facing down. The dorsal fin is continuous from near the eyes to the base of the tail, and the anal fin extends from just behind the anus to the same point on the other side. The mouth extends to the middle of the lower eye or beyond, and is nearly symmetrical. The scales are quite small and buried in the skin, making the skin appear smooth. The tail is broad, symmetrical, and lacks a distinct fork. The lateral line is strongly arched over the pectoral fin. The maximum reported size is over 8 feet in length and over 500 pounds. Inexperienced anglers occasionally confuse Pacific halibut with arrowtooth flounder. Unlike halibut, arrowtooth flounder have coarse scales and prominent, needle-like teeth. The lateral line of arrowtooth flounder is barely curved over the pectoral fin. When cooked, arrowtooth flounder turn mushy and are generally considered inedible. Most male halibut are sexually mature by about 8 years of age, while half of the females are mature by about age 12. Most halibut spawn during the period November through March, at depths of 300 to 1,500 feet. Female halibut release anywhere from a few thousand to several million eggs, depending on the size of the fish. Eggs are fertilized externally by the male. About 15 days later, the eggs hatch and the larvae drift with deep ocean currents.
Everybody else on this boat is?
As the larvae mature, they move higher in the water column and ride the surface currents to shallower, more nourishing coastal waters. In the Gulf of Alaska, the eggs and larvae are carried generally westward with the Alaska coastal current and may be transported hundreds of miles from the spawning ground. Halibut larvae start life in an upright position like other fish, with an eye on each side of the head. The left eye moves to the right side of the head when the larvae are about 1 inch long. At the same time, the coloration on the left side of the body fades. The fish end up with both eyes on the pigmented, olive to dark brown, or right, or upper side of the body, while their underside is white. By the age of 6 months, young halibut settle to the bottom in shallow near-shore areas. Halibut feed on plankton during their first year of life. Young halibut, 1 to 3 years old, feed on euphausiids, small shrimp like crustaceans, and small fish. As halibut grow, fish make up a larger part of their diet. Larger halibut eat other fish, such as herring, sandlance, capelin, smelt, pollock, sablefish, cod, and rockfish. They also consume octopus, crabs, and clams. Female halibut grow faster and reach larger sizes than male halibut. Male halibut rarely reach a length of 3 feet. Halibut size at age has changed over time. For example, the average length and weight of halibut of each age increased from the 1920s to the 1970s, and has decreased since then.
So lagoons over there.
By the 2000s, 12-year-old halibut were about 3/4 the length and about 1/2 the weight they were in the 1980s. Reasons for changes in size at age are unknown. The changes are not correlated with changes in ocean temperature. Other possible causes include competition with other species, competition among halibut, climate effects on growth or survival, effects of fishing and size limits, changes in how halibut are aged, or combinations of factors. Juvenile and some adult halibut migrate generally eastward and southward, into the Gulf of Alaska coastal current, countering the westward drift of eggs and larvae. Halibut tagged in the Bering Sea have been caught as far south as the coast of Oregon, a migration of over 2,000 miles. Because of the extensive movements of juvenile and adult halibut, the entire eastern Pacific population is treated as a single stock for purposes of assessment. Research is continuing to determine if there are spawning substocks of varying productivity. Halibut also move seasonally between shallow waters and deep waters. Mature fish move to deeper offshore areas in the fall to spawn, and return to near-shore feeding areas in early summer. It is not yet clear if fish return to the same areas to spawn or feed year after year. Pacific halibut are found on or near the continental shelf through much of the northern Pacific Ocean, from California northward to the Chukchi. Pacific halibut are highly sought for food. The flesh is white with a mild flavor, and is high in protein, minerals, vitamins, and omega-3 fatty acids. Halibut are taken in subsistence, commercial, and recreational fisheries. Halibut have been harvested for centuries by the indigenous coastal peoples of southeast, south-central, and western Alaska. Long ago, hooks were made of wood or bone, and often ornately carved with spirit figures to attract halibut. Lines were made of twisted fibers of cedar, animal sinew, or kelp. Halibut meat was preserved by drying or smoking. Despite a long history of harvest, federal halibut fishing regulations did not officially recognize and authorize the subsistence fishery until 2003. Members of federally recognized tribes as well as residents of designated rural areas and communities are now eligible to obtain a Subsistence Halibut Registration Certificate, SHARC, in order to participate in this fishery. Special permits for community harvest, ceremonial, and educational purposes also are available to qualified Alaska communities and Alaska Native tribes. Subsistence harvest has been estimated in recent years using a survey of SHARC holders. The statewide subsistence harvest in recent years has averaged around £1 million annually, with most of the harvest coming from southeast and south-central Alaska. The commercial longline fishery began in 1888 off the southern end of Vancouver Island, along the Canadian coast, and in southeast Alaska. Fishing was from dories that delivered to larger sailing ships. The fishery rapidly expanded, reaching waters of the central and western Gulf of Alaska by about 1920. Dory fishing all but ended by the early 1930s. Halibut are now taken commercially throughout their range, by a variety of catcher vessels.
Camera shy.
Yeah, almost smile. Almost smile for a camera.
Hook and line is the only legal gear for the directed fishery, and bycatch on other gears may not be retained. The commercial longline fishery accounts for the majority of removals. Annual commercial catches coastwide rose to a peak of £69 million in 1915, fell to £44 million in 1931, increased to a second peak of over £70 million in 1962, and then dropped to the historical low of around £21 million during the 1970s. Commercial harvest then rose steadily and peaked at over £70 million in the late 1980s, late 1990s, and early 2000s, and has declined since then.
Having a good time.
So much fun. So much fun. So much fun.
The commercial fishery has been managed under an individual fishery quota (IFQ) system since 1995. The IFQ system was put into place to end the race for fish caused by too many boats fishing during restricted seasons of a few days. The IFQ system has resulted in longer seasons, improved vessel safety, and fresh halibut being available about 8 months per year. Before 1973, sport halibut fishing was legal only during the commercial halibut season. Sport fishing during the closed season was common, but the regulations were not enforced because the fishery was small. With growth in the sport fishery, the International Pacific Halibut Commission officially recognized the sport fishery and established regulations in 1973. In 1975, the sport fishery in Alaska was estimated to have taken 10,000 pounds of halibut. Sport harvest in Alaska steadily increased after that, reaching over 8 million pounds by the mid-2000s. The vast majority of the coastwide sport harvest is taken in southeast and south-central Alaska. Many sport halibut anglers do not own a seaworthy boat and must fish using a charter service. The charter industry in Alaska has grown along with tourism, catering to residents and non-residents alike. Charter boats are available at all major ports, and the charter fishery now accounts for about 60 to 70% of the total Alaska sport harvest.
Kind of skinny down there.
It is. That's a big hole for not much fish.
Yeah.
The vast majority of charter clients fishing in southeast Alaska are non-residents, while resident and non-resident anglers commonly use charter boats in the more heavily populated south-central region. The Pacific halibut stock is managed under the Pacific Halibut Treaty between Canada and the United States. The International Pacific Halibut Commission, IPHC, is responsible for assessing the status of the stocks and setting harvest strategies and catch limits that provide for optimum yield. Within the United States, the North Pacific Fishery Management Council, NPFMC, is responsible for allocating the halibut resource among users and user groups fishing off Alaska. The National Marine Fisheries Service, NMFS, is responsible for developing, implementing, and enforcing regulations pertaining to management of halibut fisheries in U.S. waters. The state of Alaska participates in management through the ADF&G Commissioner's seat on the North Pacific Fishery Management Council. ADF&G licenses anglers and sport fishing businesses and guides, monitors and reports on sport and subsistence harvests, and assists federal agencies with preparation of regular. Females of several fish species can lay 1 million or more eggs a year. But cod is amongst only a few species which can readily achieve body weights of 20 kilos or more, and these fish have a larger capacity. A big female cod can lay 10 million eggs a year. Of course, most of these are simply eaten, including by cod, which is a cannibal. Nevertheless, the demographic potential is mind-boggling. And yet, as recent history has shown, we can undo it if we try. Currently, most Atlantic cod comes from Russia, Norway and Iceland. These countries have large stocks which have been well managed. For hundreds of years until about 30 years ago, there were also big cod fisheries in the North Sea and the Grand Banks off Newfoundland and New England. But these were poorly managed and now contribute less than 5% of the supply of Atlantic cod. Since about 1066, the authorities and particularly the church were very enthusiastic about fast days. Some churchmen urged 3 fast days a week. Fasting didn't mean no food, it just meant no meat. Fish was allowed. So a lot of fish was required and cod fitted the bill. It was plentiful and once salted or dried could reach everyone, everywhere. It became popular. There was plenty of cod in the North Sea, but by about 1400 fishermen had discovered prodigious quantities off Iceland, and 100 years later they arrived on the Grand Banks off Newfoundland, where even prodigious was an understatement. The fish is so thick that we have hardly been able to row a boat through them. For most of the last 100 years, catches of cod by European fishermen vastly exceeded those of any other species. Fish and chips, fish fingers, fish cakes, and in southern Europe, salt cod or bacalhau, all the consumers' fishy hotspots were based on cod. Many still are, but over the last 50 years, fishing patterns have changed dramatically. The first factor was the establishment of 200-mile fishing limits in the 1970s. This brought to an end hundreds of years of fishing by foreign nations, especially Britain, around Iceland. The second factor was overfishing, played out most starkly in the Grand Banks. After a century of landing about 250,000 tons of cod a year, a new generation of larger trawlers increased landings to 800,000 tons in the late 1960s. And then there were none. In 1992, the Canadian government announced a moratorium on cod fishing. There was none to catch, anyway. This was intended to last for a couple of years to allow stocks to recover. But only 25 years later, are there some signs of a meaningful recovery. It was a similar tale in the North Sea. Between 1960 and 1980 the cod catch quadrupled to 400,000 tons, then shrank to 30,000 tons by 2005. Scientists recommended a moratorium. Fishermen couldn't be persuaded to go that far but did limit their catches very substantially. Eventually, in 2017, scientists determined that the stock of cod in the North Sea could sustain the amount being caught, but still the catch remains only a fraction of historic levels. All this time, however, Norway, Russia and Iceland, which had stringent sustainability policies, continued to supply cod to the UK, where its popularity had never wavered. Cod farming, it's been tried. Indeed, we used to sell it, but our supplier went bust. So far as we are aware, no company has been able to make it work. In truth, the economics of farming require wild cod to be much more expensive by being fished to the limit. And, touch wood, that outcome seems to have been averted. Cod is still far and away the most popular white fish * in Britain. Including fish fingers, cod in batter, breaded cod and so on, we spend £350 million a year on cod, which makes us the world's biggest cod market, although our per capita consumption is well under half of Portugal's level. There, bacalhau is the Christmas Day meal. 9/10 of our cod are imported. We spend more on tuna, mainly in cans, and farmed salmon. But in terms of traditional white fish, we like cod, and cod. Our mainstay cod product has always been Norwegian frozen at sea fillets, filleted and frozen on the trawler within hours of capture. There are various grades of frozen at sea fillets, including trawled fish, caught by net, and line caught. We always buy line caught when available, but sometimes must buy trawled fish, and we cannot always buy Norwegian, in which case we use Icelandic or Russian. We sell these frozen at sea fillets as whole fillets. Frozen at sea is widely recognized to be a premium product, much more expensive than a second supply category, cod, which has been landed fresh for onshore processing and freezing. We also sell fillet steaks and bullets of cod. These are from a third supply category, large fresh fillets marketed as fresh fillets. This is the most expensive form of cod, often coming from boats which have been at.
All the boys are pretty fatigued, we're just about going around the clock. It's fishing for you, it's just how it is.
Better known as Joey Numbers, my Italian friend Joe Severe always put bacala, salted cod, on the Christmas dinner table. Bacala is delicious, and Joey's family never missed a chance to mention, since I'm a fisherman, that I should bring the cod next time. Instead of just shrugging off the comments, some of which questioned my angling skills, I hopped on a boat and headed off the Jersey coast, hoping the fruits of the outing would silence, even if temporarily, the incessant requests for fish. Loaded with all the necessary gear, we hit the Resurrect, 30 miles out. Without wasting a second, I dropped a fresh clam down to the bottom and immediately reeled in a 15-pound cod, sure to provide plenty of fillets for dinner at Joey Numbers' house. 2 minutes later, my cohort John King brought up a 36-pound pollock from 180 feet of water. When the action finally slowed, we filled the cooler with cod and pollock, all weighing over 8 pounds. That would have been a dream trip in Jersey waters once, but now it's a wreck angler's mainstay. Sometime around 2003, Atlantic cod and pollock populations started to rebound off the Garden State coast. It seems fish migrating down from the Georges Bank area repopulated the historic haunts off New Jersey, where both species have become viable targets once again. These known wreck dwellers settle inside and around shipwrecks and related debris 15 to 60 miles off the coast, with large concentrations often found from 25 to 50 miles out. Both cod and pollock like cold water. After a particularly cold winter, water temperatures fluctuate between 30 and 40 degrees, the fish remain active, and the spring bite off the Jersey coast is usually superb. During an average spring, when water temperatures usually range from 44 to 50 degrees, the fish stage in 120 to 150 foot depths. Come summer and fall, they move off to deeper water, taking up residence between 150 and 200 feet. Shown on the map are well-known producers of cod and pollock off the Jersey coast. Use a local chart and plotter to locate them and a fish finder to pinpoint their sweet spots. SWS staff. Pollock prefer to hang over high-profile wrecks where baitfish congregate in dense schools, enabling them to pick off any that stray near the structure. Cod, meanwhile, gravitate toward older, low-profile wooden shipwrecks in muddy bottom environments, especially those with lots of mussels and other mollusks, anemones, Jonah crabs, ling, burgles, and plenty of forage already established. Larger, whale, cod, specimens in the 30 to 50 pound range, make nooks within a particular wreck their permanent homes, whereas smaller 5 to 15 pounders tend to migrate from wreck to wreck. The key is to anchor up on the right piece of structure, says Captain Dennis Katlyarov of Russian Roulette. We don't drift like they do in Montic where there's a lot of rocky bottom. Since we predominantly have sandy bottom, we pick a wreck and anchor on it, shifting around and working the primary structure and all the edges. Freshly shucked clams are paramount for hookups, but two schools of thought permeate the clam bait plan. When there's no current running, a gob of clam works well. But during full and new moon periods when the current runs hard, a well-manicured clam tongue, cut into a streamlined strip bait that won't spin in the current, garners more strikes. Colourful surgical tubing, beads and other adornments tempt curious cod. Nick Honachevsky. All the cod over 40 pounds I've seen ate half a fresh clam tongue. It seems the cleaner the bait, the easier a cod will inhale it, says Katlyarov, who adds that shucked clam shells can also be dropped to chum up cod and incite their predatory impulses. But clams aren't the only bait that works. Mackerel, herring or burgle strip baits also do the trick. The standard go-to cod rig is a 2 to 3 hook dropper and high-low rig with either 6/0 bait holder hooks or 8/0 octopus hooks. Hooks with some added jewelry, including beads, surgical tubing, or curly tails 3 to 6 inches long, in bright colors like red, orange, hot pink, neon green or purple, outfish bare hooks most times. Bling on the rig definitely helps attract cod, Katlyarov notes. The hooks with the desired adornments should be set 18 inches apart, and a bank sinker at the end completes the rig. Cod are curious creatures. If they spy commotion in the water column, they come to investigate. So when burgles are nipping at your baits, control your instinct to swing the rod and instead let it sit. Chances are a cod will cruise by soon. Push the little fish out of the way and inhale the bait. Dropping jigs for cod and pollock is insanely exciting because both species deliver knockout punches on the tape. Jigging is best when there is a lot of bait, like herring or mackerel, around, Katlyarov states. You also need minimal current for the jig to work properly. The key is to keep the lure in each species' strike zone. For cod, a slow and low presentation is the way to go. Since cod lie near the seafloor and mill around a wreck, patrolling to about 10 feet up, their strike zone extends from 1 to 10 feet off the bottom. For best results, let a lure Jensen crippled herring or heavy diamond jig sink to the bottom, then bounce the jig and raise it 12 inches before letting it drop again. Cod often strike as the lure falls, so taking 5 or 6 cranks and then letting the jig flutter down also warrants its share of strikes. Clam baits produce a large percentage of cod weighing 40 pounds or better. Nick Honachevsky. In contrast, pollock stage over a wreck, suspending as much as 30 to 60 feet above the structure. In addition, pollock are visual feeders that quickly home in on the flash and erratic action of a lure worked quickly over their heads. Therefore, snapping butterfly jigs through the water column is a great way to prospect and get attention from any fish in the area. Of course, pollock are also notorious reaction strikers, so the yo-yo method of jigging works well. Drop a crippled herring or similar slab jig to the bottom, then reel up as fast as possible, counting how many cranks it takes for a pollock to streak out of nowhere to hit the fleeing bait imitation. This tactic lets you pinpoint the depth at which the fish are holding. Then you just drop the jig back down to that depth and repeat the process. In the last decade, cod and pollock fishing has rebounded considerably in Jersey waters, and anglers fishing wrecks spring through fall enjoy the spoils. All it takes is a boat, a solid set of wreck numbers, and the thought of a delectable meal of bacala on the table to motivate you. Rod, medium to heavy 7 to 8 foot conventional with moderate action. Reel, fast conventional with at least a 6-to-1 retrieve ratio like the Shimano Torium 20 to 30 class or Avit MXL. Line, 50-pound braided running line, 10-foot top shot of 50 to 60-pound mono. Leader, 50 to 60-pound fluorocarbon. Lures, 6 to 20-ounce lure Jensen crippled herring, hammered diamond jig, Vic jig or Ava 87 jig, rigged with red, green or orange tubing. Terminal tackle, 6/0 to 9/0 octopus or bait holder hooks, 150-pound barrel swivels, brightly colored surgical tubing, 3 to 6-inch curly tail grubs or beads, 6 to 20-ounce bank sinkers. Best jigs for cod and pollock. A number of flutter jigs and irons trick both cod and pollock.